Perek Mem Aleph. We're holding in the middle of the Perek. We read what happened last week about the first two dibros that Hashem said directly of Anochin Lo Yeh Lecha. We read it a little bit quickly, so I'll read it again and then we'll go a little bit more into it. Yotza Kol Rishon. That's what we're up to. Yotza Kol Rishon. The first voice came out. Hashem said Anochi Hashem Lekecha, and there was a whole uproar in the Bria. The heavens and the earth started making noise, made a rash. And the seas and the rivers started flowing backwards. They ran away. The mountains and the hills were displaced. And all the trees came and they bowed down in front of Hashem. And all the people, all the dead people in their graves came back to life. And they stood on their feet. It says in the pasuk. This pasuk is actually talking about when Klal Yisrael renewed the covenant with the Kadosh Baruch Hu by Arvus Mayav and Parshas Nitzavim, but Pashtus, it's Huadin that when they originally made it by Matan Torah and Har Sinai was the same idea. So it says in the pasuk, Kias asher yeshnai po yemanu oimed hayom. So it literally means Kias asher yeshnai, those which exist, po yemanu oimed hayom. Here they're standing with us today. But there's two ways to understand what the drush is. Es asher yeshnai could also mean those that used to exist. Yesha, they used to be here. So those that used to be here are standing here with us today. Meaning all the people that died, they came back to life and they're standing here with us. That's one pshat the Radal says. The other pshat the Radal says is Kes Asher, don't read it Yeshna, but read it as like Yoshnu. All the people who are sleeping, the people who are dead, so they're they're standing with us today. Like when a person is dead, it's called like he's sleeping. Uru Yesheni Makitsu Hakitsu Meirdaschan will wake up. It's talking about the dead people coming back to life. My Rebbe used to say that you want to sleep now? Wait till you're dead. Then you're going to sleep. You're going to sleep for a long time over there. But that's the lashon of Yoshu. The Radal brings a few psukim where you see that the lashon of sleeping is talking about death. So all the people that were dead, they came back to life by Matan Torah. B'chol hasidim lihibalos atzav kol hadoros. And all the people who are destined to be created all the way to the end of all generations, people that weren't born yet, but they will exist. Also, they stood there with us at Har Sinai. It says in the pasuk, "Ve'eis asher einenu po imanu hayom," and that which those that don't exist, einenu, still po imanu hayom. They're standing with us today. The pasuk in the pasuk is that it's talking about those that are with us and those that weren't born yet. We're accepting the covenant for everyone, but not that they were literally there, but they were accepting it on behalf of their descendants. But the medrash over here is darshaning it that it's going on the people that died and came back to life, and it's darshaning on people that weren't born yet, that their neshamas or whatever it means, they were also there, even though they didn't exist yet. Okay. Last week we asked the question, so why is V'Yisrael Shehem Chayim, the Jews who were alive, and when they heard Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Naflu al Pneihem V'Mesu, they fell on their faces and they died. So last week we asked the question, how could it be? Why is it that the people who were dead, so their reaction to Hashem saying Anochi Hashem Elokecha was that they came back to life, and the people that were alive, so their reaction was that they died? What happened over here? Okay, we'll discuss that in a few minutes. Fine. So somebody pointed out last week that, I think it was you maybe, that now it doesn't say that they came back to life before the second one of the dibros. It just says that they died, and then it says that it's sort of that they came back to life after the second one, after the second of the dibros.
Another place it says that
they heard the first one, they died, then they came back to life, then they heard the second one, they died, they came back to life. Okay. Then the second voice came out. And Hashem said, Lo yelecha, v'choyu. And they came back to life. V'amdu ragleihem, and the Jews stood on their feet. V'amru Moshe, they said to Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe Rabbeinu, our master Moshe, Ein anu yicholim l'shmoya koilei shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu u'masnu k'mshem shemasnu. We cannot hear the voice of, we are not able to hear the voice of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If we do it, we're going to die, just like we died previously. Shnam, it says in the Pasuk, Nafshi yatzav v'dabroi. My soul left when he was speaking. The soul of the Jews left when HaKadosh Baruch Hu was speaking. So they're saying we don't want to hear the whole Aseret Tibros from HaKadosh Baruch Hu because we're going to die. And like there's a Gemara in Mesachas Megillah that says on Daf Zayin Amud that says that they made a Purim Suda and Rabbah got up. Come Rabbah v'ashchatei Reb Zera. He shechted Reb Zera. So the next year he invited him back for his Purim Suda and he said, oh no, sorry. The Gemara says that Rabbah got up. He shechted Reb Zera and then he davened and Reb Zera came back to life. Right? So the next year he invited me for Purim Suda. So he says, no. Who said that I'm going to have the same nace this year that I had last year? Maybe you're going to come with Shech and then I'm going to be killed. So at the same time over here, the Klal Yisrael said to Moshe, we heard the first one, and we died, and we came back to life. There was a special nace. So we heard the second one, we died, and came back to life. But we don't want to hear it anymore, because maybe we're going to die, we're not going to come back to life. So we don't want to hear it anymore. We don't want to hear it directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Uchzin Pasuk says, "Vayomer Moshe daber ta'imanu v'nishma." So he said to Moshe Rabbeinu, "You speak to us, and we'll hear the Aseret Tibros. We don't want to hear it directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu." V'shama HaKadosh Baruch Hu kolan shel Yisrael v'Arafel. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu heard the voice of Klal Yisrael, what they were tining, that Hashem shouldn't say to them, that they should hear from Moshe Rabbeinu v'Arafel, and it was sweet to him. Meaning HaKadosh Baruch Hu agreed to what Klal Yisrael was saying, that they shouldn't hear it from him, they should hear it from Moshe Rabbeinu. We asked also last week, why was HaKadosh Baruch Hu so agreeable about this? I mean, it's like a shtickle bizayin. Hashem is talking to you and you're like, I don't want to hear from you, I want to hear from somebody else. Why did Hashem agree to that? What's happening over here? Okay, the next step. So what happened? So what happened was that for some reason Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want to do that. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want to say over the rest of the Aseret Tibros instead of Hashem. So what did Hashem do? So Kadosh Baruch Hu sent Michal and Gavriel, the two malachim, and they grabbed the hands of Moshe Rabbeinu, Shalei Kirtzainai, not according to his will. They forcibly grabbed Moshe Rabbeinu, V'yigishuhu el Arafel, and they pushed him. They made him go into the dark clouds. Shnamar says in the pasuk, Moshe nigash el Arafel. Moshe approached the dark cloud. Noigesh ein ksiv kan. It doesn't say he is approaching. That's not really the Jewish, but the Radal says it's supposed to say gosh ein ksiv. He approached. It doesn't say he approached. Nigash. He was approached. He was made to approach. Meaning he didn't go of his own will. The Malachim Michal and Gavriel pushed him to go into the Arafel, and then he was the one who was going to say the Dibros. And the Radal also says an interesting point that the word Nigash, the gematria equals Michal v'Gavriel. And then he says that he saw that Rav Shimshon Master Polia says the same thing. So the Michal and Gavriel made Moshe Rabbeinu approach the Arafel. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want to go willingly. Of course, the question is, why didn't Moshe Rabbeinu want to go willingly? Ushar kol advarim diber Moshe. Then the rest of the Dibros, HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke with Moshe instead of saying it directly to Klal Yisrael, and Moshe Rabbeinu said it to Klal Yisrael. V'alav HaKosav Vaymer, about Moshe Rabbeinu, the pasuk says, Kitzina sharek b'yom kotzir, like the cold of a snowy day on the Yom Kotzir, on the day of the harvest, which is Gishmak, because when you're working in the harvest season, is like right now, this time of the year. In fact, the Pirush Marzu says Yom Kotzir is talking about Shavuos, because Shavuos is called Chag HaKotzir, and that's why we read. That's why we start from Bikurim. That's why we read Rus on Shavuos, because it says that the story happened Bimei Ktsir Chitim, which is talking about Shavuos time. So the cold of snow, to have like a nice cold day in the middle of the summer, because you're out in the field harvesting, is a very gishmaka thing, and something that you can look forward to. So too, Tzir Neman L'Shalchov, an agent who is trustworthy to the one who sent him is also, it's a geshraka thing to look forward to. So the Medrash is saying that Moshe Rabbeinu was a tzir neman l'shalchov. He was a trustworthy agent to the one who sent him. HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't directly say over the rest of the dibros to Klal Yisrael. He sent Moshe Rabbeinu to say it over, and Moshe Rabbeinu was the tzir neman. That was sort of based on what Rashi and Mishlei says on that pasuk. Oh, one of the things I missed out, the Radal in the Haisafis Ois Yud Aleph, he brings that in some girsas of Pirkei Eliezer, it says when the first of the Dibros came out, it says that the sun stood in its place. We saw a whole bunch of different descriptions of what happened in nature, and so one of the things was that the sun stood in its place. But our girsa of Pirkei Eliezer doesn't have that. Okay, so basically, so we as we read this story again, we had a bunch of questions. Right? We said, first of all, why is it that the people who were dead came back to life and the people who are alive died? And second of all, why is it that when the Jews said to Kadosh Baruch to Moshe Rabbeinu, we don't want to hear it from you, we want to hear it from Hashem? Why did Hashem agree to that? The third of all, we said, why is it that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want to take over? Why didn't he want to go into the Arafel and say over the Dibros to Klal Yisrael? Why did the Malachim have to come and force him to do it? What's happening over there? Okay, so these three questions are asked by none other than Rabbi Leomi Izmir in his Pirush V'lo Oid Ella, and we're going to discuss some of the things that he says. Okay, first, why is it that the people who died came back to life and the people who are alive died? So he says that when we're talking about when Hashem said over the first of the Aseret Dibros, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, and the ruach of what he calls the ruach piv shel Kadosh Baruch Hu, the spirit of the mouth of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, not literally mouth, but that when Hashem said Anochi Hashem Elokecha, the sound resonated all over the bria throughout the whole entire creation. And we know that when a Kadosh Baruch Hu first created Adam Rishon, so it says Vayipach ba'apav nishmas ruach chayim, that Kadosh Baruch Hu blew into his nose nishmas ruach chayim. The Targum says that it was some sort of spirit that gave it Adam Rishon the ability to speak, which that's the neshama. The point of the neshama, what separates a man from an animal. Animals have nefesh, but people have neshama, which is a higher level than a nefesh. And neshama is the ability to speak. So when a Kadosh Baruch Hu blew in a ruach memalala, the Targum Onkelos Parshas Bereishis calls it, the ability to speak. That's what a Kadosh Baruch Hu gave from himself, part of himself, kibiyachol, put it into man and gave him the ability to speak. That's what a neshama is. It's a part of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. So when Hashem spoke and that ruach went all over the world. So in the dead people who are just what's a dead person? A dead person is just a goof without a neshama. So the speech of a Kadosh Baruch Hu went into their goof because it went all over the world. And then when you have a goof and a neshama, so now you have a person, so he came back to life. That's how it worked with the people who were dead. That's why they came back to life. Other people who are alive, so it works a little bit differently. There's another idea working here, and he says it over here, but it's other Mefarshim say it about other things as well. I'll first speak out the way they say it. It's brought from the Rebbe Reb Heschel. He speaks about, there's a pasuk that says, Ki lo yirani ha'adam v'chai. A person can't see a Kadosh Baruch Hu and live. If a person sees Hashem, he's going to die. So the Rebbe Reb Heschel, the Rebbe of the Shach, so he asks, why is it that if a person sees a Kadosh Baruch Hu, he's going to die? What's the reason behind it? So he
sounds like a punishment.
So he says it's either one of two things. He says either it's a punishment, like Rabbi Epstein said. It's a bizoyan that Hashem is such a high being that you go and you look at Hashem. Who are you? So you look at Hashem, you get a punishment, you get killed. Right? That's lo yirani adam b'chai. That's one way of looking at it. But the other way of looking at it is no, it's a mitzias. That's the nature of how it works. You look at Hashem, die. Why? So he says, you see, you have a calf, and the calf is walking around and enjoying itself, playing around, and then the calf sees its mother, So what does the calf do? It goes and runs off to its mother. Or I had a better mashal because it happened to me this week. You have your kids at home, and you went out somewhere, so you have a babysitter. So the kids are playing nice with the babysitter, enjoying themselves, and then you come home, and what do? You open the door, they see, they run over to the door. Oh, tati. What happened to the babysitter? Forget about the babysitter. I'm going to my tati. Right? So they say that's the pshat in Kilo Yirani Adam V'chai. When a person sees a Kodesh Baruch Hu, and we know that the neshama comes from a Kodesh Baruch Hu, like we just said, so the neshama looks and says, oh, tati. So it just like jumps out of the person's goof and wants to go connect back to Kodesh Baruch Hu. So that's why Kilo Yirani Adam V'chai. It's not a punishment, but that's the nature of it. When the neshama sees a Kodesh Baruch Hu, wants to go back to Kodesh Baruch Hu.
And if it's the same explanation that I heard once, like at the goof and the neshama are in different levels. Somehow Hashem put them connected, but Hashem is not here. He's here. He's everywhere. The thing is, the presence of Hashem is different here and there. So seeing Hashem is not. You couldn't see Him in this world. It means like the only thing that can see Hashem is the neshama, not the goof. So that's why people kivechol die.
I hear. You're saying it's because it's beyond the physical.
Yeah.
I hear.
The seeing of Hashem is. I don't know what.
It's a slightly different twist, but it's the same idea.
Die in order to see Hashem, not the
right.
people sees Hashem and dies, because it's the goof cannot see that, because the goof is limited.
Right.
And Hashem cannot be in this completely in this reveal in this.
Right. It's the same idea. It's not mamish exact thing, but.
Explain.
But what can happen about Tekiyah? Then we're going to be able to see Hashem.
Oh, so that's what we're talking about. The people that died, that came back to life by Matan Torah.
Yeah.
So how did it work that they came back to life, and the people that were alive, the Jews that were alive, when they heard Matan Torah, they died. It's like, what was the difference? So the Rebbe Reb Heschel says the difference between these two pshatim. Why is it that if a person sees Hashem, he dies? Is it because it's a punishment, or is it because that's the Mitzvos, that the neshama wants to go back to the Creator, to the Father, just like a calf wants to go back to the cow? So he says the difference. He says a nafkamina between these two explanations. He says, if it's a punishment, he says we know that malachim, the angels, they could look at a Kodesh Baruch Hu because they hang out over there in the realm of a Kodesh Baruch Hu. So he says that a tzaddik is on. The Gemara discusses in Sanhedrin if a tzaddik is greater than a malach or not as great as a malach. The Gemara basically comes out that a tzaddik is greater than a malach. So if a malach could look at Hashem and not get punished, so a tzaddik could also look at a Kodesh Baruch Hu and not get punished. So if the reason why if a person looks at Kodesh Baruch Hu and dies is because it's a punishment, so that doesn't apply to a tzaddik. And if it's because it's not a bizayon, because he's also on a higher level. But if it's a Mitzvos, so it's a Mitzvos, so then even a tzaddik. The Rebbe Heschel, it's brought in the Chanukah Torah by Parshas Vayishlach, I believe. He has a whole nafkamina. I don't want to get into about Yaakov Avinu, why Yaakov Avinu dafka sent angels to Esav. I don't want to get exactly into that, but it's a very nice word that the Rebbe Heschel says. His Talmud, Rabbi Eliezer Trillinger, has a Sefer Mishas Rabbi Eliezer. In about 4 or 5 places in the entire Sefer, he talks about this idea, and it has different equivalents. But the point is, just to take out this idea, that when a person sees a Kodesh Baruch Hu, so his neshama wants to jump out and go back to where it was. So Rabbi Leomi Israel explains that that's what happened over here as well. That when the people that were alive heard a Kodesh Baruch Hu, so we were talking about seeing, he's talking even by hearing, when they heard the voice of Kodesh Baruch Hu saying, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, so their neshamas jumped out of them and said, we want to go back to Hashem. Masha'enke, the people that were dead, that didn't have a goof, so then when Hashem's voice, when Hashem's ruach went all over the world, and then the neshamas went into all these goofs that didn't have neshamas, so they came back to life, because that's what a person is. A person is a goof with a neshama. So that's basically what Rabbi Leomi Israel answers to this question. I want to maybe say a similar idea could be, you could say a similar idea that based on the Sefer Chinuch in Parshas V'eschanan, the mitzvah Tov Chaf Aleph, he's talking about the mitzvah of Tefillin Shel Yad. He says, why did Kodesh Baruch Hu give us the mitzvah of Tefillin Shel Yad? And he says this in general about several mitzvahs, not just about Tefillin Shel Yad. He says that the teva is that chomer, let's call it gashmius, the physical things go after physical things, and spiritual things go after spiritual things. Right? This is similar to what we were saying, that the neshama wants to go to the bigger to Hashem, which is like a bigger neshama. So a physical thing wants to go to a physical thing. It says like a horse wants to go to a horse, like this said in Parak Mem Beis by Paro. So there was a female horse, and Paro was running on his male horse, and where did the male horse go? Went right after the female horse, because the physical wants to go after the physical. And a horse is completely gashmis. It only has a nefesh, doesn't have a neshama. So it says that when a person is focused on gashmias, so then he's going after gashmias. When the ikr by him is the gashmias, so he goes after the gashmias. When an ikr by a person is the ruchnis, so he goes after the ruchnis. So Kadosh Baruch Hu gave us the mitzvahs of tefillin, shalyad, and then he says about several other mitzvahs over here. He says, and also tzitzis, and also mitzvah Talmud Torah, and also tefillin and mezuzah. All these things, Kadosh Baruch Hu gave it to us to have us focus what's supposed to be our ikr. Our ikr is the neshama, the ruchnistic. And once we make that's our ikr, so then we're going after the ruchnis. We're going to try to get more and more ruchnis. But when we forget that and we're not focused on that, so then we think, oh, the ikr is the physical, the gashmias, then we start going after the physical. So Hashem wants to stop us from doing that. He gives us all these spiritual mitzvahs to keep us focused on the spiritual. So if that's true, so if you have a person who doesn't have Torah mitzvahs, a person who's dead, meis nasa chofshi min mitzvahs, hayom ma'asoisem, but do you do mitzvahs today when you're alive? But when a person is dead, there's no mitzvahs, right? So a person who's dead is just is no different, let's say, than a horse. It's just gashmis. It's just going to go after gashmis. So when the person is alive and is focused on mitzvahs, so then you could say this vart that Rabbi Leon Meizber said, that the neshama wants to go to Hashem because that's like the father of the neshama. So the neshama wants to go to the bigger neshama because the ruchnis wants to go back to the ruchnis. So that's why the people who are alive, the Jews that were getting the mitzvahs, getting the Torah and the mitzvahs there, they were focused on the ruchnis, so then the ruchnis wanted to go to the bigger ruchnis. But the people who were dead, they weren't getting any mitzvahs, they were just there. Why were the people who were dead, why did they come back to life by Matan Torah? I don't know why. The Radal asked the question also, why do they have to come back to life? Who cares? Like, what was the point? He asked the question.
Who said that? The Zohar? The Zohar said that the Messiah, that they came back to life?
What?
The Zohar said that the dead came back to life.
It could be the Zohar also, but in Pirkei Eliezer it says that.
What does it say? It said that they came back to life?
Yeah.
All the dead.
It says all the dead people that had previously died came back to life and were standing there by Matan Torah, and all the people that weren't born yet were standing there. But so the people who are dead, they don't have mitzvahs. So when they were standing, they're just a piece of gashmias. So then they're a piece of gashmias. So then you're not going to say, oh, the neshama is going to go leave them to go to the bigger neshama, because by them the ikr wasn't the neshama. They don't have Torah mitzvahs to focus on the neshama. Okay.
What's the point of dead people? The people they're not born yet. It's the same thing.
No, so it could be that the people who are not born, even though right now they're not getting mitzvahs, but since they're going to get mitzvahs, so you could say that they're focused on the mitzvahs. I hear the question. I don't know how to answer that part.
But how do you say that the people that are dead are gashmis? They look, they see Hashem. They involved with ruchnis. They don't involve with gashmis. Even though they don't have mitzvahs,
if they were dead and they came back to life and they don't have mitzvahs, so then what's a person without mitzvahs? A person without mitzvahs is the same thing as an animal.
Yeah, but once they come back to life, aren't they mechayev and mitzvahs?
So now you're getting into a different question. Now you're getting into a question like this, which is a whole interesting discussion. But I don't want to get too much into it, but it's a very interesting discussion.
But you can't say that they're involved in they're mechayev mitzvahs. Once they're mechayev, they're obligated to mitzvahs.
So it could be you're right, but like this. If a person, there's a question like this. If a person dies and comes back to life, is he the same person or is he a different person? This is a question that they ask.
Oh, 1 second. Mita mechaper. So the guy's not the same guy. The clock starts over, right?
Mechaper means that he has an atonement for his avers. Does that mean he's a new person?
That's what I'm saying. The person is what he's done in life too. So now he's got a new chance. He's got to learn again everything. Maybe different parents, different family, different everything.
So in some way that's true. But like let's say, So let's say Reb Zera. Yeah, we mentioned the story of that Rabbi Shechter Reb Zera, Gemara Megillah, right? And then he came back to life. Right. So the Ben Ish Chai.
Also the famous story of Rabbi Yochanan that killed Rav Kahana, and then he went to the
cave
and
yeah. The same idea. You can ask the same question.
The same person alive again. That's the same person.
One second. So the Ben Ish Chai in the Sefer Ben Yoyada on Megillah, he asked the question. Now, when Reb Zera died and came back to life, does he have to do another kiddushin to his wife? Because maybe he's not the same person. And then he goes a step further. He says, all the Jews that were by Matan Torah, that they all died when they heard Anochi Hashem Elokecha, and then they came back to life, do they all have to get remarried because they're different people now? So he doesn't know. He's musupik. There's rayas both ways, that you are a new person, you're not a new person. They bring a raya. I think it was that Daris brings a raya from the Gemara beginning of Yuma that says that in the future when Aaron HaKohen is going to come back to life, so he's going to have to redo his chinuch. When a Kohen starts the avodah, he has to do chinuch to dedicate himself and bring certain korbanos in the beginning. So the Gemara says he's going to have to redo it. So that sounds like he's a new person. It's not the same person. Most of the Poskim also discuss this in Even Ezra Siman Yud Zayin. It's talking about in the Pischei Tshuva he brings from the Birkei Yosef, from the Chidah. It's the Pischei Tshuva Sivkot and Aleph in Siman Yud Zayin. He says, what's the halacha if a person dies and comes back to life? Do you need a kedushin to your wife again? And he brings also, he's Musufah guy, the story of Reb Zera, and he brings a few other ayahs. And he comes out that you don't, that you're considered the same person, because the fact that you came back to life, that shows that when you died, it wasn't really a serious dying. Okay, but there's Rav Chaim Kanievsky has a whole shtickle Torah about this in one of the volumes of Siach Hasadeh. It's a whole idea. Fine. So this was the first question Rabbi Leo Izmer asks. Why is it that the people that were alive died and the people that were dead came back to life? The second question, he asks like this: when after the first two dibros, so Klal Yisrael said to Moshe Rabbeinu, "We don't want to hear it from Hashem anymore. We want to hear it from you." And the Medrash said, "For Arafel, he was happy with it." So we asked the question: why was Hashem happy with it? Isn't that a bizayon? If I'm talking to the king and then I say, "You know what? I don't want to hear it from you. I want to hear it from one of your couriers. I don't want to hear it directly from you." That's not a bizayon to the king. It's an affront to him. I don't want to hear it from your face. I want to hear it from somebody else. Well, so
every time I heard it, passing his mustard, what do you want?
The Seder, but then you're going to tell the guy, you're going to tell the king to his face that you don't want to hear it from him. He's the king.
Sorry, I'm not.
You don't mess with the king.
You don't say shh.
Yeah. You just be happy he doesn't jump head off. You know, that's the king. So Rabbi Eliezer Izmer says to.
It's not an Arab king.
Says two answers. He says, first of all, it's not a bizayon to Hashem. On the contrary, they're showing that they're covered, and they're showing that they're so scared of Hashem and that they honor Him so much that they don't want to deal with directly. They'll deal with the side person. No, I'm not worthy to deal with you. Yeah, that's one shot. The other shot, a little bit deeper, he says that why did Hashem agree to it? Because we know that Hashem wants to do good to Klal Yisrael. That's the whole point of the creation. Everything is Hashem wants to do good. Hashem wants to do good to Klal Yisrael. So Klal Yisrael realized that if we hear all the dibros from Kadosh Baruch, or at least Hashem realized that if they hear all the dibros directly from Him and not from Moshe Rabbeinu, so then if they do an avera chas v'shalom, so the punishment will be worse because you heard it directly from Hashem and you're going against it. If you hear it from a shliach, you hear it from Moshe Rabbeinu, so maybe you can get a lighter punishment because you didn't hear it directly. So because Hashem wanted to do good to Klal Yisrael, he agreed and said, "Okay, I'm not going to say it directly to you. We'll use the shliach."
But the first two we heard directly from Hashem.
Right.
So we're responsible for them. If God forbid we worship idols, we finish, man.
Right. That's dangerous.
Not really.
But there's another point over here. Okay, yeah, there's another point like this. There's a medrash. Rabbi Eliezer brings a medrash, Shmais Rabbah. It says that when Klal Yisrael did the Egel, so Moshe Rabbeinu davened to Hashem to save them from destruction. What did Moshe Rabbeinu say? One of the things the Medrash says is that Moshe Rabbeinu said to Hashem, look, you said that Seres HaDibros to them, but you weren't talking to them, you were only talking to me. You weren't really talking to all the Jews, you were just talking to me. Why? Because it says in the Pasuk, I am Hashem your God. It doesn't say Hashem Lekechem, you in plural, it says you singular. So you must have been only talking to me, not to all the Jews. So you can't punish them because, and if you look at the Seres HaDibros, all of the Seres HaDibros are said in singular form, not in plural form. Lo yihi alecha elehim acherim. It doesn't say lo yihi elochem elehim acherim. Zachor is yom Shabbos l'kadra. It doesn't say zichru is yom Shabbos l'kadra. It says all of it as if Hashem was talking to a singular person, not to multiple people. So because of that diktuk in the lashon, so there was some sort of opening from Moshe Rabbeinu to say to Kadosh Baruch Hu, look, maybe you weren't really talking to all the Jews, you were talking just to me, and therefore when they committed the horrible sin of the golden calf, so you can't hold them responsible because they didn't have the Seres HaDibros, it was only to me, it wasn't to them. That's what the Medrash says. What? Now, of course, this taina is in a way chas v'shalom to say such a thing, but shtiyot, because we know Hashem was talking to them. Why did Hashem say in a singular form? I don't know why. You could say maybe because, like we said last week, that Vayichan Sham, or 2 weeks ago, Vayichan Sham Yisrael Neged Ahar was said that they came to they camped in front of the mountain, was said in singular form because everyone was doing it together. So Kadosh Baruch Hu said it to them in singular form as if because everyone was going together. They were all accepting the Torah together. So that's why Hashem said as if he was talking to one person, not multiple people. But of course, Kadosh Baruch Hu is saying it to Klal Yisrael. But according to what we're saying, Kadosh Baruch Hu didn't directly say it to Klal Yisrael. Hashem said it to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu said it to Klal Yisrael. Now, if
I think there's a word on that because of the why singular lashon and not plural lashon, because people will come to say, look, the majority is doing, so
I know.
So it says in Torah, like, most of the people are doing, so I'm not going to do it. Maybe it's just like maybe it's more I'll do it. So it's not to me directly. It's not, I think there's a word on that.
Could be. I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, then he has a whole another shtickle Torah, whatever. The Ikar Nekuda is like this. Okay, I wanted to sort of say that Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't. He asked the question, or B'li Omer Izmi asked the question that we just said that Moshe Rabbeinu Taina that Hakadosh Baruch Hu didn't give the mitzvah of Avodah Zarah to Klal Yisrael. He gave it dafka to Moshe Rabbeinu, not to the whole Klal Yisrael, and that's what got them out of punishment for the Egel Azav. But Be'etzim, if you the Egel Azav, the Israel of Avodah Zarah is in the second one of the commandments. Lo yelach Elohim achim v'lo yisavdim. So Avodah Zarah is from the first two, so how can you say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't give it to him? I'm not sure exactly. But he asks a different question. He says that the Gemara in Yuma says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, after the Egel Azav, so they grounded up the golden calf, and they made it into a fine powder, and mixed it up with water, and they gave it to drink to everyone, and the people that served it got punished. And the Gemara says all kinds of different punishments. The people who really served it, that offered sacrifices and stuff, they got killed but with a sword, and the people that just hugged and kissed the golden calf, so they got killed with askara, which is a throat disease. And then the people that they were happy about it, but they didn't actually do anything about it, so they got hadruka and a different disease. And the Gemara says that each person that had to do with the Egel Azav got punished. But if we're saying if Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu told Hashem don't punish them because they didn't get the commandment, so then why did they get punished? So he answers, because even if they didn't get that Seres HaDibros, but still Ben Noach is not allowed to do Avodah Zarah, so they were getting punished because they were still Bnei Noach that were Avodah Zarah. But the way I want to understand it is that Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't really saying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, don't punish them because they didn't get the commandments. It's very hard to say that they didn't get the commandment. Of course we got the Torah. What's the question? I think maybe what happened, you could say that Moshe was sort of saying like a lamdisha reason. That he was saying, don't punish the Jews because they were like shaygeg or oynis, because the Erev Rav sort of convinced them to do it. That's really why they should be off the hook. But there's a concept in the Gemara called a migu. A migu is that believe me when I say a certain claim in court, because if I wanted to lie, I could say a better claim and achieve the same goal. So Moshe Rabbeinu was sort of saying, listen to me, that they shouldn't get punished because the Erev Rav was the ones that messed them over. They weren't really doing it from themselves. And listen to that claim, because otherwise I could have claimed that if you look really closely at the lashon of the Aseret Dibros, it sounds like it's only talking about a singular person talking to me, not talking to them. Maybe that's what Moshe Rabbeinu meant. Like amigo, he didn't really mean that they didn't get the commandments. I'm not sure. Okay, so the third question we asked was, why is it that afterwards, when Klal Yisrael said we don't want to hear it from Kadosh Baruch Hu, we want to hear it from Moshe Rabbeinu, so why is it that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want to go up there and say it to them? The Medrash said that Hashem sent Michal and Gabriel, and they grabbed him by the arms and they brought him into the dark cloud, and then Moshe Rabbeinu said over the why didn't he want to go originally? Why did he have to be forced? So one pshat, Rabbi Yomi Izmir says, is Pashat, some Pashat pshat, because Moshe Rabbeinu was the Anov. He's not going to go stand up in front of Klal Yisrael. Okay, instead of Hashem, I'm going to take over instead of Hashem now, and I'll tell you that Sarah said Dibros. He didn't. He was the Anav. He was more humble than that. So Hashem had to send the Malachim to go sort of force him to do it. But he says a little bit deeper pshat. It says like this. We know that a Navi can temporarily suspend any Isser in the Torah. Right? The Torah says don't do such and such. A Navi can tell you for a limited time only, you're allowed to do such and such, and sometimes it's even you're supposed to do such and such. Right? That's one of the powers that a Navi has, to temporarily suspend an Isser in the Torah. The only exception is that a Navi can never tell you to do Avodah Zarah. The Torah says, don't turn on the lights on Shabbos. If a Navi comes, a proven Navi comes and says, Hashem said that for the next few weeks you're allowed to turn on the lights on Shabbos, so we believe him. That's the halacha of a Navi. But if a Navi comes and says, for the next 2 days we're all going to be serving the Baal, no, we don't believe you. You're not a Navi, you automatically become a Navi Sheker and you get killed or whatever. A Navi cannot tell you to do Avodah Zarah. Even if he's been a proven Navi, Hashem will never tell a Navi to tell you to do Avodah Zarah. A Navi does not have the power to suspend the Isser of Avodah Zarah. A Navi only has the power to suspend other Yisurim, and only temporarily, Pashtus, and not Avodah Zarah. What's the difference? Why Avodah Zarah not, and other Yisurim yet? So the Mefarshim explained, because Avodah Zarah is the first two commandments. The first two commandments we heard directly from Hashem. So since we heard it directly from Hashem, a Navi can't suspend it. We heard it. You can't come and tell us. Don't listen to that commandment. Every other commandment we didn't hear directly from Hashem. We heard it from Moshe through Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, even though Moshe Rabbeinu's darg of nevuah, we said last week, was on a much higher level than other neviim, we could still hear the idea that one Navi could come and tell you, what that Navi said, is temporarily suspended. We can hear such a thing. So that's why a Navi could suspend other Yisurim, because we only heard it from Moshe, but we didn't hear it from Hashem. So based on this idea, Rabbi Leon Israel explains why Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want to originally say the Aseret Dibros over. Why he didn't want to say the rest of the Aseret Dibros? Because he realized that if he's the one that says it instead of Hashem directly, it could come to be that Nevi'im will have the ability to suspend the mitzvahs, and he didn't want it that there should be any way of suspending mitzvahs. He wanted a complete. Because we know that the mitzvahs is the ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he didn't want it that there should be a way of circumventing the ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So he didn't want to do that. And then when Klal Yisrael asked, we want to hear from Moshe, not from Hashem, so Hashem agreed. Why? Because Hashem said, no. I dafka want it to be this way. I dafka want it to be that a Navi could suspend the mitzvahs of the Torah in certain circumstances. So that's why Hashem agreed and said, Moshe, but you say the rest of it. I'm not going to say the rest of it. You say the rest of it over. And Rabbi Leon Meizmer says that historically we find that's gufo what strengthened the Isra of Avodah Zarah. This ability for a Navi to suspend Isurim, not of Avodah Zarah, but let's say there's Isra that you're not allowed to bring a korban outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Yeah? But what happened with Eliyahu Navi in the showdown with the Nevi'im of the Baal? So Eliyahu Navi at Har Carmel brought a korban outside of the Beis HaMikdash. How could he do that? A Navi could suspend the Isurim of the Torah temporarily. A Hirah Shah from a Navi, that's why they were able, Eliyahu Navi had a special Navua that said, you're allowed to bring a korban on Har Karmel outside of the Beis Hamikdash, so that's why he was allowed to do it. And that itself strengthened Klal Yisrael's belief against Avodah Zarah. After that, when it was Eliyahu Navi versus the Nevi'im of the Baal of the Baal were trying to bring a korban and it didn't work, and Eliyahu Navi tried to bring a korban and it did work, a fire came from Shemayim for him, and all the Jews fell on their faces and said, Hashem hu Elokim, Hashem hu Elokim. So that strengthened the Isra of Avodah Zarah. It didn't weaken it. It didn't weaken Klal Yisrael's kiyum of mitzvahs. It strengthened it. So that's why Kadosh Baruch Hu was happy to have Moshe Rabbeinu say it instead of himself saying it. That's called Eis Lasas Lashem Meferus Ersachel. It's also called Bitula Zuhi Kiyuma. Being mevatel, that's the way of keeping it. Of course, we don't have Nevi'im nowadays, so we don't have such a thing. We have the Torah, we have the halachas, and we can't change it. But a Navi who has a special relationship with the Kodesh Baruch Hu could change it.
Sometimes the Lord will tell a husband to do certain things in order to have fun wife. So in a way, it's like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, in some way. I mean, a Rav is not going to tell a person to go against halacha and do something that's mamish aser, but he'll tell you, in certain circumstances, you can be makel or different things like that. In the halacha also, the Ramah says, b'shas adchak you can be makel, or b'diavad you can be makel, or if it costs too much money, you can be. There's different. Yeah. So it comes out according to Pirkei de Eliezer. What happened was, Kadosh Baruch Hu said the first two of the dibros, and then Moshe Rabbeinu said over the rest of them. Maisa, the Razal brings down, it's a machlekes in Shir Shirim Rabbah, in the Medrash over there. What happened? Did we hear all 10 dibros from Kadosh Baruch Hu directly? If you look in the Pesukim, that's what it sounds like. It says Hashem spoke to Klal Yisrael. It says Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Lo Yiyeh Lecha, etc., etc. Lo Yisrael Hashem Elokecha. It goes through all the mitzvahs. It doesn't make a difference between the first two and the rest of them. The Pesukim sounds like Hashem said all of them to Klal Yisrael. That's one pshat in the Medrash. That's the Rabbanon. And Rabbi Shua ben Levi says no. They only heard the first two, and the rest of them they heard from Moshe Rabbeinu. The Ramban and also Rabbeinu B'chai in Parshas Yisro explained that no, really, they heard all 10. They want to explain how the Pashim Pshat and the Pesukim and these two opinions in the Medrash are not really arguing. Really, they heard all the Aseret Dibros. But they didn't understand it. They only understood the first two. Moshe Rabbeinu went and he re-explained it to them. Okay, it doesn't mean they didn't understand it. It doesn't explain. But the Radal brings from the Gra in his Pirush on the Tikkunei Zayar, Tikkun Chaf Beis, that the Gra says that first HaKadosh Baruch Hu said all of the Aseret Dibros at the same time, bevas achas. And then that's like impossible to hear. You don't know what's going on. Then he went and he said it over again. And then he said the first one, and then the second one, and then, which is when they died and came back to life, or whatever. And then they said, we don't want to hear the rest, and then Moshe Rabbeinu said over the rest of it. So that's how he puts together the Pashup Pshat and Psukim, which sounds like they heard all 10 from Kadosh Baruch Hu, with the Midrashim that are saying they only heard the first two.
So something, I don't know if there's a question here, but interesting point. It must be that the fact that the neshama leaves the body, like the people die, must be very painful. If not, people would like to, okay, let's do it again. Let's go up and go down, go up and go down. 10 times, no problem.
No, it's not.
Twice.
First of all, it's not. This summer you're right that it's probably painful. Second of all, it's not up to you. Third of all, I don't know. I haven't tried it yet. Or at least I don't remember. I don't know. I don't know if it's painful. I'm not sure.
No, what's the reason, behind this thing that we can hear from Hashem again?
I don't know.
What's the reason? Why not?
I don't know.
Well, obviously when you allow music, it hurts your ear, right? So you want to turn it down, or you want to put something in your ear. The same thing over here. These things will overwhelm.
Thunder and lightning, loud noise.
But the spiritual aspect was going down as well.
You're you're saying not exactly the fact that they died. It's just the experience that happened before that caused them to die. It was like too much.
Traumatic. You didn't want to go through that same time. When you have a traumatic experience like that, you don't want to go through the thing.
Alright, let's go weiter. It says in the pasuk, "Vayihi kishamachem es hakoil mitoich hacheshech." It says, when you heard the voice from within the darkness. So the Medrash asks, "V'lama hishmiach Kadosh Baruch Hu es koiloi mitoich ha'eish v'hacheshech v'lo mitoich ha'or." Why did Kadosh Baruch Hu have His voice be heard from within fire and darkness? Why not from light? Torah is like chachma. Chachma is light usually. So why is the Torah, which is light, coming from darkness? What shaykh is darkness? It should be coming from light, not from darkness. Why was it dark by Matan Torah? It should have been light by Matan Torah. So the Medrash says a mashal. L'ma davar doime, to what is this comparable? L'melech, to a king, shahaya astrologus, who was a king who was an astrologer. You have the word shahaya loy astrologus, but the Mefarshim take out the word loy. It doesn't mean he had an astrologer, it means he was an astrologer. And this king who was an astrologer, you could see the future, he was marrying off his son. And he was hanging by the chuppah of his son, by the wedding canopy, black curtains instead of white curtains. So the people of the palace said to him, "Adinenu HaMelech, our master the king, a person only hangs by his son's wedding white curtains. Why are you hanging black curtains? Don't you know it's out of style?" So he said to them, I know, because he's an astrologer, I know in the future that this son is not going to keep, it literally means he's not going to wait for his wife for 40 days. He's not going to keep his wife for 40 days. The Radal says that it means that he knows through astrology that there's going to be a fight and they're going to separate. Within 40 days, this marriage is going to be gone. It's going to be over. So I don't want people to say that this astrologer, he's supposed to know the future. So how come he didn't know that his son is going to get separated from his wife within 40 days? And why is he putting up a whole big white canopy or whatever by the wedding? So Dafka put black so that in 40 days from now, when they get separated, you're gonna know. Oh, that's why he put black, because he realized that that's what's gonna happen. So Kach HaMelech Zeh HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So too, the king is the Nimshal. The king is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'abein Shelo Yisrael. The son that was getting married was Klal Yisrael. V'akala Zoya Torah. And the Kala was the Torah. Klal Yisrael was marrying the Torah. Similar to what we spoke about last week. Torah Tziv Alonu Maisha Al Tikei Mayrasha Ela Me'ayrasa. That it's like a lashon of erusin, like a marriage. Not like Shabsatzi, who literally took a Sefer Torah under a chuppah and, so to speak, married it. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu was sort of an allegorical wedding. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew that the Jews are not going to keep the Dibros for 40 days, because 40 days later, right, from Shavuos till Shivas B'Tammuz, which was when they did the Egel, it's 40 days. Hashem knew that they're not going to keep it for 40 days. Therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu had His voice be heard from within a fire, and instead of a fire and light, it was a fire and darkness, to show that there's some sort of mourning and some sort of sadness happening here, even though it's a big simcha, but Hashem knows the future that it's not really going to be such a big simcha for long. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Medaber Adam im Chaveroi, when a person speaks to his friend, Hu nira v'koiloi loy nira. When a man speaks to his friend, so I'm speaking to you, you can see me, you see him, but you don't see my voice. You hear me, but you don't see my voice. V'Yisrael shamu koiloi shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'ro'u es hakol. Klal Yisrael by Matan Torah, they heard the voice of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they saw the voice. Yotze mipi hagvura uvrokim uramim. and they saw the voice of Kadosh Baruch Hu, and the lightning, and the thunder. You ever saw thunder? No. You don't see thunder. You hear thunder and you see lightning. But here at Matan Torah, Rashi and Chumash also brings this down. They saw the thunder. You can see a hearing. What does that mean? I don't know what that means. We cannot know what that. I don't know what that means. What does Rav Tat say?
The kitzer, very big kitzer.
Yeah.
But this is all be pshat, he says. This is not a.
Yeah.
All be pshat. When you see something, you see what is in
front of you.
The whole thing, you see it. It's true. It's there, instantly. Everything that's in front of you is there instantly. When you hear something, you hear step after step after step. You don't know what I'm going to
say until you say it.
Hey, until the end. And then you put out everything together and you have a concept. But it's step by step by step. So over here, Torah is that they saw the kolos, meaning when you now, okay.
They didn't literally see it. They saw the whole hearing in front of them.
When they saw the hearing, it's that hearing is a process of a step by step by step, and only at the end you know that you heard something. Over here, they saw the sound. That it was not a process, that was all right there, right then in front of them. They didn't have to put part by part by part.
Very interesting.
Heather, it was just Torah was like there. Even though Torah is a process of step by step by step. It was
that works very well with what he said from the Gra.
Even though it was supposed to be a process that you're supposed to go through, only at the end you know what you're supposed to see.
It's interesting.
They saw it instantly.
It works very well with what we said from the Gra, that Hashem originally said the whole Torah bevas achas, in one utterance, in one moment, all of it together at the same time.
Which is an Indian of seeing, because when you see something, you see it all together in one picture. So that's what Rav Katz explained. And this is all prepared pshat. This is nothing.
No, it's a good pshat. I like the pshat. Shneimar says in the pasuk, "V'chol ha'am royim es ha'kolos ve'es ha'lapidim," and all the nations saw the voices and the torches.
The halacha is when you hear what are you supposed to say? Natan Koya, Hashem, is a bracha, right? You say for lightning, you say for
Shekoicha yugvorasai mali olam.
Right. So you can't say that unless you see the lightning first.
Right.
Is that correct? In other words, you have to see the lightning first, and then you can say the bracha
on
the thunder. Right.
Because if you don't see the lightning, then there's no liar that lightning produced that thunder.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
And the Chazal say, hearing something is not the same as seeing it.
Seeing is knowing. Hearing, you're not sure.
I don't remember what the pshat is, but they say that in the Gemara, when the Gemara wants to bring a proof to something, so it says Toshma, come in here. Yeah. In the Zohar, when it brings proofs to things, it says Tochazi, come and see. I forgot what the word is, but it also has something to do with this difference between seeing and hearing.
Yeah, correct.
Not this in the same part of the he also says this thing.
That's like when you tell somebody a vart, you tell them an idea. So he says, I see. And if you tell it to Yeshivish guy, he says, I hear. I don't know what the pshat is. No, you hear?
I hear.
Okay, weiter. Kol mitzvahs shebetorah 613 mitzvahs. All the mitzvahs in the Torah is 613 mitzvahs. Ushtaim shedibar Kadosh Baruch Hu. And if you take two mitzvahs that Kadosh Baruch Hu said himself, v'fichach nikra Torah. Therefore it's called Torah. Uminyan Torah 613 esrei. Ushtaim dibar Hashem. Shneimer achas dibar Elikim. Ushtaim zu shamati. It's a little, the lashon of it is a little bit confusing, but it's really, this is just quoting a Gemara in the end of Mesachas Makas, Chav Gimel Amud Beis. This Gemara is probably the most famous Gemara that ever exists, and has probably the most amount of Mefarshim written on about it. The Gemara Mesachas Makas Chav Gimel Beis Chav Talim Aleph Torah Shrebi Simloi Sheish Miyos V'Shleishes Mitzvos Nemar Lo Moshe 613 mitzvahs were said to Moshe Rabbeinu. Shloish Miyos V'Shishim V'Chamesh Lavin 365 negative commandments, like Kaminim Yimaisachama, like the days of the solar calendar of the solar year. Umasayim V'Aboyim Shmoin Hasrei and 248 essay positive commandments corresponding to the 248 limbs of a person. Omar of Hamnuna Mikra, what's the pasuk? How do you know that there's 613 mitzvahs? This is the most famous Gemara. 613 mitzvahs. Everyone knows 613 mitzvahs. Even the Reformed Jew knows. What does he know from Gemara? 613 mitzvahs. Mikra, how do we know what's the pasuk? It says the pasuk, Torah tzivalanu Moshe Ma'irasha. Torah tzivalanu Moshe Ma'irasha. Moshe gave us a Torah. What's Torah? Torah, begematria, shis mea v'chatzri. Torah in gematria is 611. Shis mea v'chatzri havi is 611. Anoichi v'lo yiyalacha mipia gvura shamanum. And Anoichi and Lo Yelacha, the first two of the sisters, we heard it from Kadosh Baruch Hu. So 611 plus those two is 613. The word Torah is gematria 611 plus two more mitzvahs that we have heard from Hashem, which is 613. So that Torah is 613 mitzvahs. Now this is the most amount of Mefarshim, because what are the 613 mitzvahs? Well, the Rambam wrote a whole book about it, and the Ramban wrote a whole book, and the Smag, and the Smak, and the Chinuch, and Rabbeinu Dovid HaKeichavi, and Rav Sadia Goyin, and Azharis of Rabbi Avoyin HaGadol, tons of the Tashbits, and everyone wrote tons of svarim about how to count the 613 mitzvahs. But everyone, the Gemara says 613 mitzvahs. The continuation of the Gemara over there is very interesting. It says that originally Moshe Rabbeinu gave us 613 mitzvahs. Then, as the generations came, and 613 is a big number, so it became less and less. Not that the mitzvahs became less, but like, if I want to tell you what do I have to do, what does Hashem want from me? So I'll tell you 613 things that Hashem wants from you. So yeah, that's a lot of things. So as the generations progressed and people devolved, so different Nevi'im came along and said, we'll put it into like 10 categories. The Gemara says, David David Melech came and said, put the 613 mitzvahs into 10 categories. It says in the pasuk, Tilim Perek Tezvav, Mitzvah David, Hashem, mi agur ba'aracha, who lives in the tent of Hashem, mi yishkein b'har kodshecha, who lives on the mountain of His holiness. Who? What does Hashem mean? Who is a good person? What does Hashem consider a good person? Hoylech tamim upoyel tzedek v'dover emes bilvavoi lo regal al l'shaynai lo yasel re'ehu ra'a v'charpa lo ynosel al kroivoi nivza be'enov nimas ve'es yirei Hashem yichabed nishpa l'ra v'lo yomer katzpa lo nasam beneshech v'sheichad al noki lo lokach asa eila, a person does all 11 of these things, lo yimay la'olam, he's not going to be displaced forever. And then the Gemara explains what each of these 11 things exactly means. And then the Gemara goes and says, comes along Yeshaya, it says, David Melech said 11, and the subsequent generations, Yeshaya came and said, it's 11, or I'll give you 6. Yeshaya, Hoylech tzedakais, v'dever meisharim, moyet v'petza, ma'ashkais noyer kapov, Mitzmech b'sheichad, oitem ozem mishmaya domim, v'oitem einav mira'ois bara, v'hoilech tzedakos. I'm sorry, v'oitem einav mira'ois bara, that's 6. And then the Gemara says, explains what each of these 6 categories means. Then the Gemara says, comes along Micha, another Navi, and he says, I'll give you 3 things. What are the 3 things? It's Haftarah. What's this Haftarah for? I don't remember. It's Haftarah. I think it's like the last pasuk in Sefer Micha. Tell a person what's good. What does Hashem want from you? Kim asis mishpat, do mishpat, va'avas chesed, v'atztei alachasim Hashem leikecha, and be tzanua. These are all 613 commandments could fit into these 3 categories. And then the Gemara says, and then Yeshaya came back, and we said Yeshaya made it from 10 to 6, and then Micha made it from 6 to 3. Yeshaya came back and went from Micha's 3 to down to 2. people want to say that there's two Yeshayas, because the first one is Yeshaya Lamed Gimel. This is in Yeshaya Perek Nun Vav. In the academic world, they take the book of Isaiah, which is very big, and they split it into two. They have Isaiah and Deutero-Isaiah. And that's in the book critics. That's the two. So this could be. So they want to say, oh, this is the second Isaiah, because this is in the later chapters, Perek Nun Vav. Well, really, the main thing that's bothering the academic world about it is because the beginning of Yeshaya is talking about all the bad things that are going to happen to Klal Yisrael by the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash or whatever, and then the good things. Then the second half of Yeshaya is talking about all the good things that are going to happen, and they couldn't understand how one person could be saying good things and bad things, and they don't like that. But we understand that first you say we have the plus the Puranias, the 3 weeks between Shiva Shabbat Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. So we have Haftarahs for 3 weeks saying all the Puranias that's going to happen, and then after over the Shev Derachamta, the 7 Haftarahs of Nechama. I think all of them are from Yeshaya, most of them are from Yeshaya. I think all of them are from Yeshaya. They're from the second half. The same Navi gives good nevuahs and bad nevuahs. That whatever Hashem tells him, this is the way it is. It doesn't bother us that the same Navi says, okay, but so one of the things that they say is, oh, this Gemara has Yeshaya, and then Micha, and then Yeshaya again, and they want to bring a raya from this Gemara, but stam shtiyot.
And what about Hosea? He put it on one.
Oh, one second. So Yeshaya said, Koyamar Hashem, Shimru Mishpat v'asut tzedakah. What does Hashem want? Koyamar, this is what Hashem says. Shimru Mishpat v'asut tzedakah. All mitzvahs can fall into these two categories: Mishpat and tzedakah. What's Mishpat and tzedakah? That's a time for a different discussion. But that's a discussion for a different time. But then the Gemara says, so this is two. Then the Gemara says either Amos came and said, there's one thing. Koyma Hashem, the base is so Deshuni v'chiu. Just be Derish Hashem. All mitzvahs fall into the category of Derish Hashem. Or the Gemara says, or the other pshat is that it was Habakuk came along. Not what was it? Hoshaya? Not Hoshaya. It was Habakuk comes along and says, Tzadik be'emunah sayichya. Tzadik lives with his emunah. Everything falls into the category of emunah. Habakuk Perek Beis. Interestingly, Habakuk, the end of Perek Beis and Perek Gimel is the Haftarah for the second day of Shavuos in Chutz La'aretz. We don't have second day of Shavuos, but that.
What about Moses? When he said the only thing you have to do is fear Hashem.
What? Oh, you're right. It's saying good. It says in the pasuk, "V'atay Yisrael ma Hashem lekecha shel me'imach kim liyiras Hashem lekecha." So how does that work? I don't know. How does that work with 613? And maybe that fits into the Gemara. I don't know. It could be the Gemara talks about it. I don't remember. It could be the Mefarshim speak about it. But what time is it?
10:35.
10:35. Okay, I had another word I was going to say over, but we'll just finish the parak right now instead. Rabbi Pinchas Omer. Rabbi Pinchas says, "Kol oisei hadar shishamu kodesh shel Kadosh Baruch Hu." That entire generation that heard the voice of Kadosh Baruch Hu b'Har Sinai, zochu liyos kemalachei hasharis. They merited to be like the ministering angels. Lo ro tipas karim b'yamehem. They didn't see any accidental seminal emissions in their lives. Lo mashu behem kol minei kinim. And when they died, different types of lice didn't eat up their bodies. Actually, no. This means that when they were alive, they didn't have lice. And when they died, they didn't have worms and rima v'sileo eating them and being ruling over them. They're fortunate in this world. They're fortunate in the world to come. About that generation, the pasuk says in Tilim, Ashrei ha'am shekach. Fortunate or praiseworthy is the nation that such is to them. And just one thing to leave off with, the Pirish Marzu says, Shekach aloi. Shekacha is gematria Moshe. Right? Shekacha, the two chafs is a mem, and then you have a shin and a hey. Gematria Moshe. I don't know what he's trying to say, what he means by that, but it's an interesting idea. Alright, good Shabbos. Thank you for coming. Next week we'll be back to normal Perek Yud Dalet.